Math 3, Unit 1, Section 2, we are going to be talking about describing translations. So the first thing that you need to do is graph and label f of x and g of x on the same coordinate axis. Okay, then you want to describe the translation from f of x to g of x. Okay, so first of all, do you guys know what type of graphs f of x and g of x are going to make? Very good. These are linear. And how do we know that they are linear? Very good. No exponents, no quadratics, no absolute value. When you have f of x like this, you also know that this basically is your y value. Okay? What would be your starting point for this graph? 3, -4. Again, whatever's in parentheses, we set that equal to 0, which would make that 3, and then we have -4 at the end. Also with lines, we can plug in points how we have been, or we could also use our slope. And that right there is your slope, which is 1/2. Yes? No, and the reason why it's not -3 is that whatever is in parentheses, we always set that equal to 0. And so when you end up setting that equal to 0, you end up getting x equals +3. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and graph our f of x equation. We use our starting point first. So we go right 1, 2, 3, -4. And to help you out with the translations, each starting point, I would highlight that starting point so that you remember that's where you were at. And then we need to make one more point in order to draw our line. So from that starting point, I can use my slope, which is up 1, right 2. We could have also gone down 1 and left 2 because 2 negatives make a positive. So if we go negative, negative, and then we can draw our line. If you want to plug in points, you would choose a point, you know, to the right or to the left of your starting point to get your other point. Any questions on that graph? Okay. So, also we need to label this. This is our f of x equation. So now g of x. What is my starting point for g of x? Good. -2, 3. Again, x plus 2, set it equal to 0. You get x equals -2. And then the number not in the parenthesis, that is our y, part of my starting point. My slope for this one is also what? 1/2. Okay? So going to the graph, we're going to plot -2, 3. So we go left 2 and up 1, 2, 3. And I would highlight that. It's going to help me with my translation part. And then again, my slope is up 1, right 2, or down 1, left 2. And we draw our line and label that as g of x. Good. Now it says, what is the description for f of x to g of x? So here is f of x. How do we get from this starting point to this starting point? How do you move? And if you're having a hard time like seeing this at all when you're doing your work, again, you could highlight from point to point. So in this translation, from f of x to g of x, it's going left how many? Very good. Left 5. And then it's going seven up. I am totally fine with you writing it like this, left 5 up 7. Sometimes people will write it like this, T for translation, and then they do kind of like one of those arrow things, or like it looks like an inequality sign almost, and then left 5. So you know how when you have ordered pairs, the x part is first. So right and left is your x part. So that would be -5 because left is negative. And then on the y part, it would be a +7 for going up 7. So that's just another notation. But if you just write left 5, up 7, that works. Okay? All right, any questions on this before we move on? Okay, so what type of equation is this one? Very good. Quadratic is correct, which means it's going to look like what type of shape? A U shape. Good. A quadratic. Good. All right. So on this one, this one actually has a vertex. It's a starting point, but it's specifically a vertex. And what is that vertex? -2, 3. Okay, so -2, 3 is my starting point. So we go left 2, up 1, 2, 3, make a point. We know that this one is symmetric, and again, I'm going to highlight that point. So remember, it's my starting point. If you want to make the whole line, you can. But I think by highlighting that, hopefully you'll remember the symmetric part. For parabolas, because they aren't lines, a parabola is a curved surface, you cannot use slope. And so you have to plug in points. So what would be a good point to plug into this? You could either do -1 or you could do 0. Okay, so you guys want to use 0? Okay, so I'm going to write it right here. We're going to plug in 0 for x. We have negative parenthesis 0 plus 2 to the second power plus 3. 0 plus 2 is 2. What's 2 to the second power? 4. So we have -4 plus 3, which makes -1. So this point is 0, -1. So 0, -1, and because quadratics are symmetrical, see how this is 2 away from the vertex line? So we go 2 away on the other side to make our other point. And then we draw our curve. And make sure you label that as f of x. Do we have any questions right now? Okay, so the other g of x, what would be my vertex on g of x? Good, 5, -1 is correct. So we're going to go 5, -1, and we're going to highlight that starting point. And again, because it's a quadratic with the curve function, we have to plug in a point in order to get another point on here. So going to the right or the left, what would be a good value to choose? What? Yeah, we could choose 4. Okay, because if you look, 4 is 1 to the left of that vertex, so choosing 1 or 2 to the left or 1 or 2 to the right is good. So we are going to choose 4, and we're going to plug it into our equation. So we have negative parenthesis 4 minus 5 squared minus 1. What is 4 minus 5? Good, -1. And what is -1 squared? +1. Good. So we end up, though, because of the negative on the outside, we still end up with a -1 minus 1, which makes -2. So this point is at 4, -2. And then again, symmetrical across the vertex, so it's 1 there, and we go 1 to the right, and there's that other point, and we can draw this function, which is g of x. Okay, does everybody understand how I'm getting these points and numbers and choosing them? Anybody confused by anything right now? Okay, so then now we have to describe the translation. So again, if it's easier for you to see, go ahead and highlight from point to point, and then we need to describe what has happened. It will change based on where you start in terms of if you're going from f of x to g of x or g of x to f of x. So make sure that you're starting where they're telling you to start. So based on this, how is it moving? Right 7, and then down 4. And then another way that you could write that if you wanted to would be translation. Right 7 would make a positive 7, and down 4 would make a negative 4. Okay. Any questions? There is a typo on this next problem. Can anyone find what it is? So absolute values, are these normally squared? No. No. So there should not have been squares here. And this is an absolute value function, or linear absolute value. Okay, so absolute value has a vertex. What will be my vertex for my f of x function? Perfect. -2, -4 is correct. Now, absolute value, that is straight lines. Do you guys agree? So we can either plug in points, or because absolute value has straight lines, you can actually use your slope. Okay? Do you know what the slope would be on this one? What value is in front of our absolute value? 3. That is your slope. The slope is 3, or 3 over 1. So I'm showing you guys some shortcuts for these problems right now. Could you always just go and plug in points if you're not sure what to do? Yes. Okay, so let's go to our starting point. We're going to go -2, -4. Make our point. We're going to highlight that starting point so it'll help with the translation. And then the slope. Now this is where you have to be careful. The slope is positive. So should my v be going up or down? Up. And so from here we're going to go up, right, or up 1, 2, 3, right 1. And then you're also going up 3 and left 1 because why? Because it's symmetrical. It needs to make that V shape. And then label that as f of x. Okay, I'm going to let you guys go ahead and do the g of x on your own here for a minute, and then try to describe the translation. And if you have the answer, raise your hand and I'll come around and check. Or if you need help, raise your hand and I'll come help. Perfect. means it's going to make more shape because anything inside you can that's the idea is positive. Okay, so that's what it's going to be. This one goes to do you want to volunteer to go and finish that problem for me? So the translation was up 7, right 3. Okay? So if you got that, then you have it correct. Is there anyone that's willing to go do it? Yes. Okay, so T on this one did everything perfectly. I'm just going to kind of talk through it really quick. So our vertex is at 1, 3. Okay, and again, thank you, and you can get your candy if you want one. The vertex was at 1, 3 based on our equation right here. So right 1 up 3, he highlighted that point. He chose to not use the slope, which is totally fine. He plugged in a value. He should have plugged in, yeah, like right here, plugging in a 2 because it's to the right of this, right? And when he plugged in 2, he ended up getting 6, right? 2 up 1, 2, 3. And then you go the same distance on the other side, and he drew that, highlighted it, and these points, so from f of x to g of x, it went right 1, 2, 3, and up 7. Does anybody have questions on that? Okay, so we're going to do our one last problem here. Am I okay to move this? Okay? All right. So first of all, what type of graph is this? Very good. And for our exponential functions, our starting point is always at what? 0, 1. And then on this one, once I have the 0, 1, it's going to translate what based on that information there? Right 3, up 1. Why? How do I know? Yeah, that when you set that equal to 0 will make a positive 3 with the x, so x is right and left, And then this value at the end is how it's going to go up or down. So at 0, 1, we're going to go right 1, 2, 3, and up 1. What about my asymptote? It was at 0, and it's going to go where? Up 1. We're going to choose 1 point to make one more point for this graph, and we're going to go to the right one. What is the x value when I go to the right one? 4. So we're going to choose 4 for x, and I'm plugging it into my f of x equation. Okay? 2 to the 4 minus 3 plus 1. And 2 to the 4 minus 3, 4 minus 3 is what? 1, and 2 to the first is 2, and we end up with 2 plus 1, which is 3. So 4, 3 is my point. And then we're just going to draw our exponential function, and we're going to label that as f of x. Also, I forgot to do this, but we should highlight that starting point. Okay, I'm going to give you like less than a minute. I want you to get your starting point for g of x on your own. So if my starting point is at 0, 1, which way am I going to translate my graph after that? Left 4, down 5. Okay, so 0, 1, left 1, 2, 3, 4, down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to highlight that. What happened with my asymptote? Where is it going to go? So it's starting at 0, because it's like we have a different graph here. We start at 0 and it goes down 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so it should be at y equals negative 5. Okay, choosing a number to the right of this, what value should I choose for x for this equation? Very good, negative 3 is right, or correct. So we have 2 to the negative 3 plus 4 minus 5. Negative 3 plus 4 makes what? 1. 2 to the first is 2, and 2 minus 5 equals negative 3. So this ordered pair is negative 3, negative 3. So negative 3, down 1, 2, 3. Make our exponential function. And then we need to label that as g of x. And then write what happened with our translation. Did anyone figure out what it is? Down 6. Left 7. Do we agree? So translating it, I wrote this in the opposite order, but left 7, that would go in the x part, negative 7, and then the y part up and down is 6.